Hey guys, Kevin here. So I am leaving the alt-right. I've had it up to here. And so have thousands of other people. No, I'm joking. I'm not leaving the alt-right. Neither are thousands of other people. But there are people out there who want you to believe this is true. In fact, there is a whole grassroots movement right now, that's being created around people leaving the alt-right. Actually, it's astroturf, like everything else the left does. Now, for those of you who don't know, astroturf is the opposite of grassroots. It's, according to Urban Dictionary, a movement that has the perception of being grassroots, but people are being paid to pretend to like it or be a part of it. And the left, they love astroturf movements. Look, they've been doing this a long time, creating these fake movements. And it's lucky that we on the right are not hive-minded like they are, because if we were, we'd all jump on board with this stuff. But that's why we're not on the left, because we don't go along with anything that's trendy. And I don't think they've learned this lesson yet. But they are trying to create a fake grassroots movement, just like they tried to do with the Women's March, just like they tried to do with Disrupt J20, just like the AstroTurf movement that is Black Lives Matter. They are trying to create this fake movement funded by billionaires, supported by the press, and using all of the social media platforms that is trying to convince people to leave the alt-right and that others are leaving the alt-right. And what's very interesting, and we'll get into it, is that they are using some pretty well-known existing YouTubers and content creators to try to create this movement. So I'm going to show you guys a video, and this video popped into my suggestions a few weeks ago, and it's really weird because I never get left-wing political videos suggested to me. Besides my friends who have YouTube channels and a few other people like Revenge of the Sis, Vincent James, those types of channels, I don't get a lot of suggestions for political videos, much less left-wing political videos. But then all of a sudden I started getting a bunch of left-wing suggestions. And some of the videos I got suggested were made by creators that this guy mentions by name. So that's what clued me into the fact that this is a new fake grassroots left-wing hashtag walkaway campaign. Now, to be fair, the right-wing hashtag walkaway campaign, in my opinion, was also astroturf. I mean, the people who made those videos were real people who left the Democratic Party, but they didn't leave it because of that campaign. They left the Democratic Party long before that with a lot of other people, and we're seeing that still to this day. Certain demographics are leaving the Democratic Party when you talk about Hispanics who are leaving over social issues, and you talk about aging millennials who are just naturally getting older, taking on more responsibility, having kids, having to balance a checkbook, and they think it's ridiculous that a government can't balance their budget. So people become more conservative over time. That's the natural order. I mean, you never see a grandpa go, oh, you know, in 60 years, I've seen such success from the federal government, and I love child drag queens. I think I'll vote Democrat this year.
I'm just going to get right into it. I fell down the alt-right rabbit hole. My story, it actually starts in high school. I was a young idealistic kid, very interested in ideas. I'd spend a lot of time on YouTube. I'd spend a lot of time on the internet and reading things. And in high school, I went through all different sorts of ideologies and different ideas. Some conspiracy theories here and there, some things that were real, different religions.
And the Oscar for Best Actor in a Propaganda Film goes to Caleb. Guys, the second you hear conspiracy theories, you know that this is like a false archetype of what a left-winger thinks an alt-right person would be. From the mom's house wallpaper in the background to the backstory, this nerdy kid, it's all just imaginary. I mean, I think that I'm alt-right by their definition, I don't think of myself as alt-right, but I am a right-wing populist and a nationalist. And I was never like that. And nobody I know was ever like that. When I was his age especially. Look, I'm more nerdy now than I was when I was his age. When I was his age, I was in Iraq. I was a Chad. I was lifting weights every day and going to the clubs at night. Now I'm nerdier. Now I collect comic books and antique glassware. You know, this is me now. And most of the people I know who are hard right are much more like me and nothing like that. But maybe he's a monolith. So let's watch a little more.
You know, when I was in high school, I listened to bands like the Dead Kennedys and System of a Down and Muse and all these bands that had a revolutionary, like, anti-authority, pushing back against oppression, lyrics to their songs. And I listened to the lyrics and I was really in tune with that.
You know, I listened to those bands too, but I always understood that oppression comes from government. And I think it's funny that the band he mentioned, the Dead Kennedys, their lead singer, shoots YouTube videos talking about how the rich need to pay their fair share while he films in front of his $30,000 entryway in his $5 million California mansion.
But, so fast forward to my graduation and I go to college. I really thought I was ready. I thought that this is it. It's time to, I come from a poor rural background, and I thought that I was going to get myself out of this situation, get an engineering degree, go, get into environmentalism, maybe solar panels or something, and I was going to change the world and accomplish all my dreams and get out of this small little town that I hated. And get away from my family, which I did not get along with, and get away from all these, like, it's funny looking back, conservative type of society that I felt was too regimented and wanted to control me, and I didn't see any value in it. But when I went to college, that's not what happened. I got depressed. I went to this tiny little community college in West Virginia. And there weren't a lot of people like me there, or at least I never found them. And I got in with the wrong crowds.
Okay, this is sounding like a 1990s PSA. He was in with the wrong crowd, man. When I was in college, the Republicans, we wore Sperry loafers and polo shirts. Nobody would ever consider us the wrong crowd.
Basically, I would stay in my room and I would just surf the web all day. And I went back to YouTube. Something that was comforting for me when I was in high school, going through, these types of experiences, this type of frustration. But this time, I went to YouTube for a purpose. And, eventually, as I was looking through all these videos, this little video, this YouTuber popped up in my sidebar. And, it had an interesting, like, clickbaity title. And it was something about the truth about therapy, or it was something to do with depression and self-help and bettering yourself, and it looked interesting to me. I clicked on it, and it was this Canadian YouTuber, and I think you guys know where I'm going with this if you're familiar with these circles, but it was Stefan Molyneux, and Stefan resonated with me. Stefan resonated with me because Stefan had shared the same experiences that I had shared. Stefan, he had a traumatic childhood. He had issues with his mother. He had issues with the rest of his family. He had issues with the society around him. He was angry with the society around him that it never stepped in and did anything to help him, to help him escape from that childhood pain and that trauma that he carried with him. And these were all things that I felt. And it rang so true to me. And then he started talking about how he was able to get out of it. And, and basically, like, he blamed a lot of his situation on liberalism and, this sort of just the culture that we live in today, the culture that we enjoy.
Dun dun dun, Stefan Molyneux, the gateway drug to the alt-right. All right, guys, I want to play a game. I want you to think about what he just said and then listen to this next section. And if it all sounds really familiar, like it was adapted from something else and made into a script, you tell me what that might be in the comments section and you win. Now, what do you win? Well, you win not being retarded and easily duped by left-wing propaganda. That's what you win.
As I went down the rabbit hole, now mind you, Steph's ideas, this was 2014. When I found him, his ideas were a lot more mild. And so I got introduced to people like Crowder and Shapiro. And once I started listening to them, I started believing into a lot of the conservative principles. And then from there, I got introduced to people like Lauren Southern and Gavin McInnes, and then finally, by the end of it, I'm listening to Jared Taylor talk about racial differences.
All right, so what'd you guess? Because if you guessed the Data and Society Alternative Influencer Report, then ding, 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 you win. You're not retarded. You're also not retarded if you didn't know what that was. Not many people do, but this kid is basically acting out a screenplay that was adapted from the Data and Society Alternative Influencer Network report. And that report is a conspiracy theory. It's a left-wing conspiracy theory complete with the little spider web the conspiracy theorists use. You can see it right there. Yeah, it connects all these people who are like alt-right or just normal Republicans to people who are very hard-right and even the white nationalist crowd. It shows how people go from Dave Rubin and then only a few YouTube videos later, they're watching Jared Taylor and Richard Spencer. It's complete rubbish. Nobody becomes radicalized by watching YouTube videos like that. And nobody on the right becomes more far right because they watched another person's YouTube video. Let me explain to you guys what happens, because what this kid is saying, that never happens. All right, 99% of people on the far right, including myself, this is how we became far right. All right, listen up. First, we start by being maybe liberal. Myself, I was more libertarian, like classically liberal. I was always into free markets, things like that. The only difference was, as I got older, I started paying taxes. I realized that I can do a lot more with $5,000 a month that I'm paying in taxes than the government could do for me by paying those taxes. I realized that if I put in the same amount that I was paying into Social Security into a Roth IRA or a mutual fund that performed even below average over 45 years, by the time I'm 65, I'd be a millionaire. Instead, with the government, I'd only get $600, $700 a month. So those kinds of things made me more conservative. Then I started having kids. And what do you know? Having kids, I decided maybe I don't like these public schools so much. Maybe they're not such a great idea because the private schools outperform them, even though the public schools get more money per student than any other school system in the world. They're all failing because they're run by this centralized federal government, or at least the standards are set by that centralized federal government. Then, after having kids, I started to travel a little bit more. I went to other countries. I'd been to a lot of these countries before I had kids too, but once you have kids, you start to realize, well, maybe we should not bring certain people into this country, specifically the ones who have destroyed my wife's home country, or the ones who are cutting off people's heads in their country, especially because I have daughters. And I know that certain cultures value my daughters much less than they value male children. So yeah, that's what makes me more far right today, not any of these influencers on social media. And all they're doing with these kinds of videos is exposing the fact that the left are the ones who use propaganda to try to influence people.
I bought into that, and because of that, I started to see society as a product of this, the combination between culture and race being so important because it's tied to IQ. And so I saw Western civilization as like this traditional values plus a high IQ and a strong sense of self. And so I bought more and more into it. I went further down the funnel. And at the point where I landed, I wouldn't call it full alt-right, personally, because of a few beliefs that I didn't have. You know, for example, full alt-righters, they believe in the Jewish conspiracy, that they rule the world. I didn't believe that. But, so I would consider myself alt-right. And I would say at the bottom of that pyramid, that upside down, that funnel, would be fascism. And I didn't go that far, but I did entertain ideas, and especially during the Trump era, about a strong leader. We had to expel the invaders, which I saw as like Muslims and Marxists, and we had to expel the traitors, which, you know, once again were like the communists and anybody that was promoting degeneracy within our culture. You know, this is where you get the stupid fucking memes about helicopter rides, you know, from the Pinochet dictatorship, where they threw communists out of helicopters. And I started to sympathize with these sorts of ideas.
So, you know, he's really like a cartoon character of what a left-winger thinks a right-winger is, but even a broken clock is right twice a day, and I have to agree we should be throwing communists out of helicopters. Anyway, let's watch the end of this where he talks about his transformation into a beautiful social justice butterfly, and then we'll talk about what this is really all about.
I'm not a dumb person, but I didn't have the wherewithal, not the intelligence, but the education to combat these things.
Okay, so this is the part where I knew this was a script written by a left-winger, because only a left-winger would say something like that. I wasn't educated. I wasn't stupid. I just wasn't educated. We hear people on the left say this all the time about Republicans. When they don't know any Republicans, they say, oh, they're not bad people. They're just not educated on the LGBTQ community. Or they're not educated on immigration. We have to educate them. What they mean is re-educate you. And I have news for you guys on the left. In this household right here, there are 3 hard right adults who live here. My wife, myself, and her sister. And combined, we have over 20 years of university. We have a higher IQ than your whole contacts list on your phone. And we have more life experience and have traveled to more countries than you ever will in 5 lifetimes. But we're uneducated. I hate that crap. But you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe a hipster in Brooklyn who's 25 and watches Maddow and has a degree in underwater basket weaving with a minor in psychology or philosophy. They've read Descartes, so they're educated. They've read Carl Jung, so they know more than we do, especially on political issues. Yeah, right. All right, so let's find out how he was educated. Maybe we can get educated too.
I began to become nervous more and more scared, and not even skeptical, but just afraid. I found a YouTuber named Destiny. Destiny is a Twitch streamer / YouTuber from Nebraska, Omaha. I think recently moved to LA. And he would go into these debates with alt-right figures. You know, he gets a lot of shit for this, but he would go into debates with alt-right figures. And one of the alt-right figures that he went into a debate with was Lauren Southern. They had a debate on immigration. Now, immigration was a huge issue for me. I saw what had happened in Germany. I had, once again, these are all false premises that I had, but I saw what was happening in our country with illegal immigration, and I had this fear that if we let in too many people at once, that they would not assimilate, and that they would cause problems, and that society would fall apart. And Destiny debated Lauren Southern on immigration. And needless to say, he destroyed her. I mean, he mopped the floor with her. And Lauren Southern was someone that was well respected in her community. She was someone that had very close ties to even Stefan. And she just looked like a complete idiot. And not only that, but Destiny completely dunked on her and just embarrassed her.
All right, so I want to get into how Destiny fits into this whole fake walk away campaign the left are doing. But before I do that, let me just say Destiny is an excellent debater. He's not wrong in this video. What he is wrong about is that Destiny would not convince anybody on the right to become a left-winger. In fact, he's not even a good debater in the same sense that I am. He's not good at presenting a point and then convincing other people that his point is right. What he is good at is nitpicking on certain points made by his opponents and then getting them to try to double down on points that he knows he can disprove. And I'll give you two good examples of his tactics. One in that debate with Lauren Southern was when Destiny said that he would be okay with cutting welfare for migrants into Europe. Well, Lauren Southern's whole point was about how these migrants are costing the economies of Europe money because they're coming in and living off of the system. And she's not wrong. And so Destiny just shut her down by saying, okay, I'd be okay with cutting welfare for migrants. Well, Destiny is a left-winger, so that's not a left-wing position at all. And Lauren Southern didn't know what to do with that. So then she went on to say, well, what about crime? What about the migrant crime? She should have stayed there and said, well, if migrants are coming just for welfare, what does it say about those people in the first place? And what does it say that our countries are willing to give all of this welfare to people instead of using that money domestically on their own ethnic populations? But anyway, she went on to say that the crime was bad and that it can be directly traced to migrants. And she's not wrong. But what Destiny did was he picked that same set of statistics she used and said, well, look, crime overall is not changing that much, and the change we have seen is just property crimes. And Lauren Southern didn't know what to do. But what she should have said was, all right, well, let's look at the demographic breakdowns of those crime statistics. And she was just focusing on new migrants. When you look at the statistics, children of migrants actually are committing more crime and are responsible for far more terrorism. So those kinds of things she completely ignored because she was on the defensive the whole time. And that's sort of his style. But I do think it's interesting that Destiny's videos started coming into my suggestions the same time that this video did. And the guy mentions another person on the left whose videos also started appearing in my suggestions the same time this video did. And I'm sure many of you guys might be seeing this as well. And this next person is ContraPoints. Now, ContraPoints is like the left-wing Milo Yiannopoulos. It's a transgender person who does videos where they act out these little skits with two people arguing between each other, sometimes more than two people. But here's the thing. Vice, a few months before these videos came out, Vice did an article and a video about how ContraPoints was changing and converting people on the alt-right to progressivism. So you see that same narrative coming into play. And Destiny was a part of another article that was written about ContraPoints and several other YouTubers who are converting people from the alt-right to the left. So you can see how this all comes together.
That's fallen into this. But as I watched Destiny more, I came across another YouTuber called ContraPoints. And Natalie, I mean, I had this aversion to her at first because I had all these goofy ideas about trans people. But Natalie, she spoke to me. She spoke my language. She was like one of me. We were about the same age, and she understood the culture that I was in. She understood the memes. She understood the philosophy. She understood the motivations, and she was able to repeat back to me why I found it so compelling.
Okay, so from alt-right to fetishizing men in drag in only a couple of videos. What a transformation. Now, here's the thing. Just like Destiny, ContraPoints is a very good YouTuber. Her videos are very high quality. And yes, I said her. I don't do the whole pronouns thing. All right, I just respect people in general if they're good at what they do. And I don't care about pronouns, really. This whole thing he said about being suspicious of trans people. That's weird. Nobody on the right is suspicious of trans people. That's something a left-winger would say or think about a person on the right. We think that trans people are mentally ill. We think kids should not be sexualized and shown drag queen story hours. But we don't think trans people are people we need to be suspicious of. No, they have a body identity disorder, and people on the left are doing them a disservice by telling them that they're normal. It's like me. I have PTSD. If somebody says that I'm normal and I should not get treatment, then they are my enemy because they are trying to do harm to me. Just like people on the left telling people with body identity disorder to go ahead and cut off your body parts and ignore what the doctors might say, ignore what the psychologists might say, forget the 80% regret rate. So yeah, you get the point. Anyway, ContraPoints makes good videos. Destiny makes good videos. But they are the best the left have to offer. They are the highest caliber of left-wing content creators. And they're still not good enough to convince anybody on the alt-right to change sides. I should know I'm an alt-right leader. Well, I'm not really. I'm not even alt-right. But the left called me an alt-right leader. And I have not met one person on the right who has changed sides or even one position because of Destiny or ContraPoints. But even if they did change one position, we are not like the left. We can change positions and still be on the right. The left are the hive-minded people. So if somebody in the right gets easily influenced and changes all of their political positions because of one video, then we don't need that type of person. Especially not a beta male loser like this kid. And that's the point, right? This guy can't offer any reasons why the right are wrong. Not once in this video, and I cut a lot out, but not once does he say what people like Stefan Molyneux or Lauren Southern were wrong about, nor does he ever say what people on the left are right about. So if you can't defend your own positions, if you can't think for yourself, because lots of people in the alt-right, they might agree with Destiny that we need Medicare for all. There are people like that in the alt-right, but they're still nationalists, they're still populists. They just agree with that one position. They don't need to be hive-minded. If they were, they'd be on the left. But all of this plays into the bigger picture, which is Destiny, Cult of Dusty, ContraPoints. They've all been featured in articles lately, articles that have this exact message. These influencers are bringing people over from the alt-right. One about ContraPoints. This drag queen is teaching young alt-right males to be progressive. Those kinds of articles have all been popping up lately, featuring these YouTubers and content creators. And they're setting up this narrative that they are a way for people to move from the alt-right to progressivism. And that they should just hashtag walk away. It's all astroturf. Anyway, that's all I got, guys. I hope you will like and subscribe to the channel. Share this video. If you like the video, you can support the channel at PayPal at www.paypal.me/HailHydra1. That's HEIL Hydra 1.